Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's coffee break. Today, we will take a look at security operations as a whole. But first, I'd like to introduce myself and our panel experts. I'm Megan Reed, the VP of Marketing at NetGain Technologies, and joining me today is Scott Logan, Director of Security at NetGain. Scott has over 40 years of experience in the technology industry. 10 of those years are specific to IT security. Also with us is Tim Smoot, Senior Systems Engineer at Arctic Wolf Networks. He has over 25 years of experience in the IT industry. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us, Megan.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, so to kick us off, I would like to start with our first polling question. Out of these 5 categories, what do you feel is your organization's biggest struggle? Scott and Tim, while we give the audience time to respond, give me your perspective on the current threat landscape. Scott, I'll start with you.
You know, a lot of the businesses that I work with continually have issues where they just don't have the expertise in place. They've got great IT folks, don't get me wrong, they're very strong engineering capabilities, but they just don't have the security understanding to be able to properly position tools, to be able to properly provide information and direction in making a security posture more protected, more secure. I think that's some of the challenges that are out there right now that I think are most relevant.
Tim, anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Probably the one that comes front to mind with respect to the threat landscape today is, you know, we know that a lot of folks have been either forced or decided to really roll that work from home type functionality, and in doing so, they've had to do it quickly. And anytime you add speed to deployment, you introduce some deviations from your standard operating procedures, some quality control checks and things of that nature. So I think the threat landscape has really broadened, and it's kind of thinned out the ability for organizations to be more articulate about what's going on with respect to threat surfaces as well as security posture as a whole.
Awesome. Well, let's close this poll and see how the results came out. So it looks like majority, 70% of individuals are struggling with that continuous security improvement. I think that will be part of our discussion today. So let's jump in here. We want to jump into what it means to take an operational approach. So Tim, I'm going to pass the baton to you at this point.
Yeah, certainly the understanding and the ability to kind of see your security profile and or your tools as one actionable data set is probably the most beneficial realization that most organizations come to the conclusion of. You know, in the real security world, I think sometimes we get pushed into corners thinking that, you know, just the firewall log or just the network log, or you know, this log or that log is specific or more important than the other. The truth is information is power when we're talking about security. So being able to see all of those different aspects of your overall information base that as it relates to security, and some of those things don't necessarily specifically at front of mind think they're security related, but seeing and combining all those together in one actionable data set really does help a lot in actually addressing your threat surfaces.
Totally agree, Tim. You know, when I work with businesses, I constantly see that they've got the tools, they've got the ability to be able to react to the information. The problem is that the tools are either not set up completely. They're only about 10 to 20% of their actual deliverable that's been established in the tool, or that the information that's being provided by the tool is just not leveraged by key personnel, by people that can actually make great decisions on the information that's provided. If you look at Target back in 2017, when Target was influenced and was attacked, that they had the tools in place. They just didn't have the people in place that were able to leverage the information to prevent the attack. That's what I see constantly in the business place right now. It's certainly a struggle and a challenge in a lot of the organizations. And as organizations prepare for their attacks, as they try to position their security, they have to keep in mind that it's not just an 8 to 5 security challenge. It's a 24/7. The attackers are up at 3 a.m. and that's when they're probably knocking on the door the hardest, trying to infiltrate their network. And so it requires an amount of security coverage that is consistent throughout that 24/7 process, keeping eyes on the attack, keeping eyes on the information, being able to properly put security in place where it needs to be done. And I think that's another one of the major challenges that businesses have today.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, when we start looking at all of the different breaches that have happened, one of the interesting and completely not included parts of that information is what time of the day it happened. The truth is that, you know, there's a huge investment in organizations for IT people across the board. Doesn't matter if they're infrastructure focused or they're software focused or security focused. The truth is there's a huge investment in those people, but there's also a very big investment by those individuals to be focused or not be focused, but be jacks of all trades. When we're talking about security, going back to your point about the Target breach, the truth is that even if we've made an investment on a dedicated security individual or individuals, the truth is we probably don't have the luxury, most organizations don't, of dedicating time to those people that we've invested in to provide them with the ongoing training, the experience, and the up-to-date capabilities that they need to see these new threat surfaces and or threat vectors. And that's really difficult for these folks to be actionable and capable of doing their job on an ongoing basis because of that.
I agree. And how many times do you come across an organization that has an IT guy trying to wear a security hat, or the compliance officer is trying to do more than just manage compliance? It's really unfortunate for a lot of businesses that are in the SMB lines that have to force those operations, those controls, that particular job function onto somebody that's really not prepared to manage that type of thing. They just don't have the expertise to be able to drive the business where it needs to be driven.
Yeah, and there's no doubt about it that when we look at the security industry as a whole, the amount of jobs that are open just keeps getting exponentially higher. The other challenge that goes along with that, though, is the fact that there are so many open positions. Even a good security individual, more than likely, you get them on staff and you just turn over the hourglass for the time that they're going to be moving on. That doesn't make them bad people. You know, everybody's trying to do the very best they can, not only in the job that they do, but also provide for their families. But when we look at security as an operational aspect, we really have to think about that long-term approach. And sometimes looking at that continuous improvement and the thought process of integrating security into our day-to-day operations as opposed to something we do after we do everything else can really be beneficial.
I totally agree. And you know, and having the right people in place, having those security experts, the certified people that understand exactly what the security controls mean, how the security controls need to be adjusted for the enterprise so that the security posture is properly aligned. That guidance is so beneficial to a business. Having a good security posture isn't something that you just turn on. It's not a light switch. It requires a lot of pieces to be moved. It requires a lot of controls to be adjusted so that the business operates effectively, efficiently, and securely. And that guidance is one of the key factors of establishing a strong security control.
Yeah, and the one word that I didn't hear you say, but I feel is without a doubt one of the most important ones is effective. Right. So when we look at all of the different words that relate to any part of our IT infrastructure, effectiveness has to be one of the things that results in what we do. And when I say effectiveness, we go back to looking at all these different pieces and parts that contribute to your security posture. And if we can parse through that information on a quick and effective way, the outcomes are much more articulate and they're much quicker. So that approach of looking at everything together as one correlated data set really contributes to our security being something that kind of runs in step or along with our business, as opposed to something we do secondarily.
I know. And if we look back at that poll, 70% of the people thought that security improvement was their biggest challenge. And it's true. I mean, I see it all the time. I see organizations, they establish an understanding of their risks, they establish their understanding of their vulnerabilities, but it's a single point in time, it's a snapshot. And there's no adjustment, there's no remediation, no mitigation factors that are executed in order to improve that posturing. It's a constant challenge, and it can't just be a one and done thing. It has to be constantly washed, rinsed, and repeated, so that you're constantly reevaluating what's going on. You're making new mitigation, new remediation factors, and then you're reevaluating those. Have you properly secured what you thought you secured? Those are challenges that businesses face all the time. I totally agree with that poll.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that when you do these kind of polls with respect to security, the results are almost always pretty much the same. And the thing that I would contribute to that as well is that it is coming to the front of a lot of people's minds, right? They're starting to recognize how important security is. At Arctic Wolf, about 70% of our customers that we onboard have extremely good security tools implemented, but 70% of those actually have some kind of a breach in process as we're onboarding them. So we can't really take the approach that people aren't doing a good job or they're not trying to do a good job. We have to take the approach that there are pieces and parts that need to be better articulated and certainly better implemented in order to contribute to that overall security posture, which again goes to that ongoing security improvement. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's one that if you take that security operations approach and leverage someone like Arctic Wolf or NetGain, you can certainly see how that benefits an organization going forward.
Good point.
Yeah, so if I were to kind of sum up your discussion there, it sounds like, you know, there's lots of tools, there's more and more awareness, the budget is being available for IT security more and more, but, you know, taking this security operations approach and paying attention to these 5 pieces here, and then working through that continuous improvement, right? That's the way to achieve the cybersecurity effectiveness that businesses need. Is that fair?
100%.
As we kind of wrap this up, you know, if you do think of any other questions after today's webinar, feel free to reach out to us at NetGain. There is contact information on the screen, so if you do have any, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate your insights today, and thank you everybody for attending the coffee break on IT security. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to today's coffee break. If you were able to join us last week, you probably remember our speakers, but for those of you who were unable to join, I am Megan Reed, VP of Marketing at NetGain Technologies, and joining me again is Scott Logan, Director of Security at NetGain, and Tim Smoot, Senior Systems Engineer at Arctic Wolf Networks. Today, we are going to take a deeper dive into managed detection and response. And to kick us off, we'd like to learn a little bit more about you all. So I'm going to throw up our first polling question here. Let's see. Do you have or are you looking for a managed detection and response solution? Please review the options and select the one that best describes where your organization falls. Tim, in one sentence, why do organizations choose a managed and detection response solution?
I think the primary reason why managed detection and response, and Scott and I will probably refer to it as MDR more than once during this coffee break, but a lot of the reason why folks are looking at MDR solutions is we're trying to get a correlated and combined information source as a proactive tool for preventing breaches and or detecting them quickly so that they can be reacted to. It's a pretty complicated thought process when you start looking at preventing and or detecting these kind of breaches, because how fast and agile the landscape is from a threat perspective. So having a tool that has the ability to see those different aspects of your infrastructure and evaluating the information based on those infrastructure pieces gives you the ability to protect and detect those kind of issues on an ongoing basis.
Sure, sure. Anything you want to add, Scott, before I close down the poll?
Yeah, I think the key letter in MDR is R. I think a lot of businesses have the tools that provide them a ton of information. They just don't have anything that reacts to it. There's no response mechanism associated to their tools. I think that's the key part of managed detection response.
All right, let's close down our poll. I'm going to share the results with everyone here. So it looks like about 50% of organizations already have a solution, and
Awesome.
a mixed bag on the rest. So, all right, thank you all for participating. So now that we better understand where the audience kind of lies in their managed detection and response journey, let's jump in. Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, and when we're talking about typical MDR tools, the truth is that there are a lot to choose from, and the first thing we don't want to do is start pointing fingers and saying something's bad or not a good option. The truth is that if those folks that joined us for our first coffee break talking about that security operations type mentality is typically managed detection response tools are limited in scope, right? So they don't have the ability to see everything, or they also are focused specifically on a typical type of vendor or a specific piece of information on the infrastructure. And that really limits its effectiveness and causes an opportunity for some things to get by. And the thing that we're trying to look at and to make better from an MDR perspective is to broaden that scope, to get that visibility much more inclusive across the infrastructure, which gives us more information. And the more information we have, the better we can protect and the better we can respond.
Totally agree, Tim. You and I have taken part in a lot of discussion about MDR, and one of the things that you always talk about, you stress upon, is that it's an active model. And I love the idea that MDR should be an active and not a reactive model, right? But to be an active model, it has to be successful, the data can't hide from the solution. All the logs and the data must be under constant review. And log ingestion can't be limited. Data can't be unavailable. And if the program is to be truly effective, the false positives must be recognized and eliminated to avoid hours of valuable engineering time sitting there sifting through this magnitude of data.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, every tool that we buy in the security industry, doesn't matter which person it is or which organization it is. The truth is what we're targeting, and what we really want is the outcomes. And a lot of the tools that are out there in the market today don't really provide outcomes. They do that 10-yard line drop off, right, where they're kind of leaning on the customer to finalize the research element of that data set. So confirm that something is or isn't a false positive, or confirm that something is or isn't in the house by supplying a Google link or something like that. And then the other side of that is, once that customer has confirmed that something is in the house, now they have to do more research to figure out how to remediate it. So when you start thinking about the security tools that you have implemented in an organization and kind of attaching that whole target into that outcomes type talk track, the truth is that that's the part of most security implementations that's missing, is the outcome.
Agreed. And I was really happy in the poll that a lot of our viewers have already started down the MDR path. Maybe they already have it instituted, maybe they're in progress of getting it added to their security posture. But the key part of any type of EDR or MDR program is that it is always on. There's a 24/7 eyes on what's happening in my infrastructure. I want to know what's happening. I want to know where the data is moving. I want to know if there's problems within an asset. Those definitions have to be recognized 24/7 because the bad guys, they're sitting out there at the middle of the night doing what they need to do while you're trying to get some rest, and that's where you can have a lot of your problems.
Without a doubt. It's a tricky dynamic when you think about it. Now, there's certainly a large segment of the nefarious actors out there, the hackers and those kind of folks that are lazy, right? They're just basically leveraging a tool that's been used for years, whether it's a botnet or malware or encryption ware, anything like that. But the truth is there are some folks that are very creative. You know, when we start thinking about the three-tiered aspect of security, it really comes to light that, you know, folks are figuring out how to leverage those on-prem weaknesses as well as those remote weaknesses. And COVID-19 obviously has brought a lot of that into the front of people's minds, and then also the cloud weaknesses. And if your MDR tools and or the way you're looking at the information from those tools don't include that three-tier thought process, then you're missing something. And typically you don't figure out that you're missing something until you're actually hacked.
That's true. Yeah, I saw a statistics, 667% lift in phishing attacks since COVID-19. You know, a lot of remote workers, a lot of people are working from home, and when you get home, you tend to relax a little bit, and your guard's not as high as when you're in the office, and they're trying to take advantage of those styles of attack. So there's a lot of information in the logs that can bring an awareness of that type of attack happening, and you have to have those eyes on it. And then when I say eyes on it, I'm talking about security professionals. A lot of the data that is just created by these tools, there's just so much of it. It can drive in so many directions. You have to have somebody that's certified, that's trained to understand what the data means, sift through the false positives like you were talking about, and bring the actionable items home to the IT team so that they can be reactive.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's truly about information, right? Information is power, and we can't try to protect our entire infrastructure or our entire organization by just looking at one or two or three pieces of data. And when we start shopping around for tools and we look at those tools and they say, yeah, we do MDR or we do EDR, and you know, we love this log from this specific vendor and this log from this specific vendor. Oh, and we'll take your Active Directory log as well, but that's it. How many more pieces and reference material information sets are left on the table that could be correlated and leveraged in order to eliminate those false positives, which is probably a good portion of the work of weeding through those false positives, and then get to the meat of the investigations and or remediations that goes along with it. You know, we hear a lot of tools come to market today that are using that wonderful artificial intelligence and machine learning tagline. And those are great tools. I don't want to belabor them at all. But at the end of the day, artificial intelligence isn't intelligent. It has to be taught. And the bad thing about that is it can be taught that bad things are okay. So the bad guys are figuring that kind of stuff out. They're just as smart as the rest of us. And one of my old friends that has been doing security for a very, very long time actually made a statement that said, if a human being built it, a human being can break it. That's all there is to it. There's no way around that. So that broad visibility is definitely something that helps us a lot, because at no point, hopefully, it should never happen that a hacker coming in from the outside has the same visibility into your infrastructure as you do.
I totally agree. And working within MDR Solutions, I want to have a resource available to me that can help me drive some of my understanding, provide me forensic understanding of what's happening within my infrastructure, especially in lieu of a breach. If there's something that happened in my infrastructure, I want to know what happened. I want to know my root cause. And I want to have somebody that I can depend on, that I can talk to about that. And so it's very frustrating if I make a call to a support group, a maintenance group, and I have to re-explain my infrastructure to them. That is very frustrating. I want to talk to somebody that knows my infrastructure and be able to provide me a good understanding about what's going on based on how my infrastructure is created. And so that's certainly a big part of a good managed detection and response solution.
Yeah, that's right. It looks like Tim might be having some challenges with his internet connection. So, Scott, anything you want to wrap up there before I jump into the Q&As?
I just want to make point that the managed detection response solutions are designed to provide information, notification, and response to those particular incidents. And if you have the right MDR solution in place, I would like for it to be able to go out and take a device that is showing up as being possibly infectious and remove it. Don't even ask me if it's a workstation or something like that that has something going on with it. I want it to take it out. I want it to contain it, and then we'll deal with it on the backside. But don't let it be infectious to my network. I think that's a good MDR program, a good position to be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. Let's move us right along here because we are coming up on our 15 minutes here shortly. So now I do want to open it up for questions. If you haven't done so already, please submit your questions using the questions panel on the bottom right hand of your screen. And while we're doing that, we do want to know if we are able to help you. So I'm going to throw up a polling question while we go through some of these questions here, and if we can help you, just please let us know. So Scott, the first question, it looks like, is it possible to purchase a self-contained managed detection and response tool?
So there are vendors that provide managed detection and response tools, but traditionally MDR is viewed as a deliverable based on other tools and information and sources. When MDR is sold as a tool, it typically is limited in scope in some way, either by visibility, meaning it leverages only specific logs or specific vendor logs, or by the outcome, provides industry standard threat hunting or high-level log review, and not true outcomes. These types of tools still require the end user to perform further research into false positive elimination and interesting investigations and build remediation steps and actions.
Okay. Second question, how does containment benefit an organization?
All right, so let's look at this scenario. Some nefarious activity occurs on a user's endpoint at, let's say, 3 a.m. And the IT guys are at home and they're dreaming about the next generation of core processors and resting their exhausted little IT minds. So now, what do? There's 5 hours now of malicious activity that will have free reign on my company's network. Do we start running down the cell phone tree and wake our worn out engineers, or do we simply contain the threat and isolate the system that's in question in real time? Containment takes the system that is potentially infected off the network so that the infection won't be able to spread. Let's let the IT guys sleep a little bit. They deserve it.
Yes, they do, definitely. All right, third question. What kind of information or logs should an MDR tool be looking at?
Literally everything it possibly can. The real truth about security posture is the understanding that what you know and the hackers and nefarious actors don't know. It's truly an advantage. Having visibility into all the logs information in a correlated way is of the utmost importance. On top of that, developing a known good traffic pattern to compare your day-to-day activity, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute traffic flow quickly provides visibility into the possible threats that tools-only approach simply can't provide. The evolution of the MDR has required that the industry move beyond the reactive, proactive thought process and understand that the security requires us to take an active approach.
Yes, an active approach is much needed and much necessary. So looks like that's most of the questions for today. But if you do have any other questions on this topic, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. The contact information is displayed on your screen. We're happy to have side conversations. If you want to talk about specifics with your organization, please let us know those things. Thank you to Tim, who unfortunately we lost, I think, on the internet connection side of things. But thank you, Scott, as well, for your insights. And thank you,
Absolutely.
everybody, for attending today's coffee break on IT security. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to today's coffee break. If you were able to join us last week, you probably remember our speakers, but for those of you who were not able to join, I'm Megan Reed, VP of Marketing at NetGain, and joining me is Scott Logan, Director of Security at NetGain, and Tim Smoot, Senior Systems Engineer at Arctic Wolf Networks. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes. Today we are going to take a deeper dive into managed risk. And as with previous events, we want to kick it off with a quick polling question. So we want to learn a little bit about you all. Do you have or are you looking for a managed risk solution? Check out the options and select the one on your screen while we give everyone time to respond. Tim, what is managed risk?
Well, I think managed risk is probably traditionally the easiest of the security tools to think about in terms of it's a proactive tool. The whole thought process behind managed risk is to look for the things that you know, the information that the industry is aware of, both from a threats perspective, but also from a patching and an application vulnerability side of the coin, and then look for those and eliminate those before they can be exploited. The new part of managed risk, however, is extending that barrier and those risk thought processes past the individual endpoints and starting to look at things like your external web access and cloud-based tools and things of that nature.
Wonderful. Scott, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, last week we talked about managed detection and response, or an MDR platform, and I love the idea of having something that's monitoring my network and looking for nefarious activity and being able to provide a result or prevention for it. But I need something that will also scan my assets and identify weaknesses in them if something nefarious isn't happening. I want something that will constantly review what's going on throughout my infrastructure and provide me a result of weakness. And I think that's where the MR platform really succeeds.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Let's close this poll here and see how the results came in. So it looks like a good number of the individuals on the call have a managed risk solution, and some are not actively looking but are interested. So that is good to know, and it can help guide the conversation a little bit. So let's get moving along here. All right, let's jump straight into managed risk. Tim, you want to start us off?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of times when we think about security tools, what we think about specifically on security tools kind of gets mudged together a little bit. And when we're thinking about managed risk, the good news about that is it's kind of a very well known and very well documented thought process with respect to the security protections that it provides. Threat surfaces expand. As we mentioned earlier, the fact that the cloud and other types of threats are getting more and more prevalent every day.
but we have the ability to take what we know and develop a very targeted and very specific query on your internal environment and your external environment to look for those threats, as Scott mentioned, that we can eliminate from the get-go, which allows us to focus more on those MDR type functionalities and react to threats that have made it through those tools.
Yeah, Tim, totally agree. And our poll, 83% said they're already executing a managed risk solution. I wonder, of that 83%, how many of those tools that are being used for MR are manual? And how often are you providing that managed risk review? Most MR platforms are a one and done type of scenario. You execute, you drive result, and then you try to provide remediation. That is a risk review or a risk measurement, but a managed risk program is going to be something that is more continuous, a 24/7 platform, something that is constantly looking for weaknesses in your assets and providing a direction of what you need to do to remediate that. Don't you agree?
Well, without a doubt, I think the biggest thing that gets kind of shoved under the rug when you talk about managed risk is, number one, I think what you're driving towards, which is that continuous vulnerability element, where you don't really want to get it stuck into a rut where you're doing scheduled scans, once a week or twice a week or once a quarter or twice a year. You're deploying assets all the time. You've got new users, you've got new applications, you've got new operating system versions and patches and things that literally come out monthly. And doing a scheduled scan typically results in one or two of those assets never being turned on at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. And if they're not turned on one time, they're likely not going to be turned on any others. And to add insult to injury, I think a lot of the managed risk tools that are out there, the majority actually, are agent-based tools, which is a great thing. Definitely not trying to disparage that at all. However, when we start thinking about managed risk, we can't kind of shoehorn or pin ourselves into that agent-based methodology when we think about risk. We've got to look at those assets, like IoT and printers and appliances and things of that nature that are definitely not capable of running those agents. We know risks that are associated with those, and we can look and expand and definitely detect those kind of risks and expose those to the customer base so that they can be remediated. You really don't want to get stuck in that rut of thinking that the only risk in your environment are those machines that run agents.
Yeah, and I've used those tools before, and they flood me with information, right? I just got a ton of weaknesses now that have been identified, vulnerabilities all over the friggin' scale. I don't even know where to start. I need something that is going to prioritize what is necessary in order for me to improve my security posture and address the assets that are identified as weak. I need something to put a priority and maybe even a risk score so that I can get an overall understanding of what my actual risk is, something I can deliver to my leadership team to show them my awareness of what I'm doing in order to improve our infrastructure. That type of understanding of priority and understanding of risk scoring is just a necessity of the program. And most of the tools that are out there that provide risk understanding just don't deliver that.
Yeah, I go back a lot into previous lives from an employment perspective. I managed a credit union data center for 10 years. And, in the banking side of the coin, when you start talking about audits and security and things of that nature, obviously they're very stringent and they have high expectations out of each and every one of those folks that are responsible for obtaining and maintaining that security. And their perspective on things like risk is very, very focused. And when I say that, what I mean is they don't give you half results. They give you exactly what your problems are. And when you see them twice a year, it is frustrating to try to address them and get those risks taken care of. But if we were, back to your point earlier, if we were doing that on a regular basis, on a continuous basis, you know, when the auditor showed up, I would be able to sit there and just grin because I knew I was good to go. Prioritization, you mentioned that, and there's certainly no doubt that that's the other kind of skeleton in the closet, is that, you know, the simple things are deploying patches and doing software updates and things of that nature to eliminate known risks. The more difficult things are the ones that we need to rely on skilled tools and individuals to find and narrow down for us, and then prioritize those so that we know which ones are higher and which ones are lower. I was literally reading just before this coffee break started that Palo Alto has a vulnerability that the industry is recommending that folks focus on right now, because they know it will be exploited as soon as it possibly can be. So, but Palo Alto firewalls and a lot of their other gear, they're great gear. Like, no one's going to look at Palo and say that's a bad plan, but they're also not perfect. And, you know, if a human being wrote it, a human being can break it, right? But at the end of the day, being aware of those things that are outside of those agent-based vulnerability tools is definitely important.
Yeah, and I can appreciate the effort of what happens during an audit. You know, I've sat on the opposite side of those audit tables, and you know, they're asking, are we doing certain things with our vulnerability and risk management programs? And you just can't hand them a 50-page vulnerability report and say, yes, I'm doing this. You have to provide them more understanding than that. And so the ability to have direct reporting associated to your risk findings is essential in an audit situation. I was reading something from Gartner. Gartner put out a statement that said that by 2022, organizations that adopt a risk-based vulnerability management program will suffer 80% fewer breaches. That's amazing to think that if I am not aware of what's happening in my enterprise, if I've got a solution that is constantly looking at what's going on with my assets 24/7 and providing me great understanding of what my remediation effort needs to be in a prioritized state, that puts me in that category where Gartner's saying I'm going to exist at 80% less breaches.
Definitely. And, you know, the last thing I would say is probably the stitching of all of it together. And it is the fact that internal and external vulnerability are things from a risk perspective that we have to look at as a unified thought process. We can't continue to think that simply preventing known internal vulnerabilities at our endpoint is the only way to be proactive in our overall security posture. There are very, very well documented and known external vulnerabilities out there, and whether those are just external firewall, VPN based vulnerabilities, applications, web based vulnerabilities, all those kind of things. Now we're starting to get assets and things of that nature that are being distributed on the dark web. Tools like Arctic Wolf are going out and they're querying those asset bases, and we're getting ahead of that information being passed around and letting customers know beforehand in a proactive way that, hey, this is another vulnerability that's known, and we're providing you that information so you can remediate it. So, we have to expand our thought process, expand our visibility, and understand that there is a lot more to it than just simply internal vulnerability.
Yeah, that's great, guys. 80% is a very, very large number, or very large percentage. So now we'd like to open the floor for questions. If you haven't done so already, please submit your question using the questions panel on the bottom right of your screen. And while you are doing that, I want to throw up another polling question, because we want to know how we can help you and how we can help continue this conversation and take you all to the next level in your security posture. So please take a second to answer that, and I will clear that off the screen in a minute or so here. Looks like our first question is, if you have an antivirus solution and a patch management tool, Don't I have risk covered? Tim, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a very common question, and honestly, there are some customers and or vendors that kind of lump those antivirus and patch management tools into the realm of a managed risk type tool. And the truth is that they're similar in the fact that they do very specific things. And the truth is that antivirus products out there, for the most part, don't really react kind of dynamically, right? They're looking for a very specific type of information, and then they tell you when they find them. Patch management tools are exactly the same, right? They're going out and querying machines and looking for specific patches that should be deployed based on the applications or operating systems that are deployed on that asset, and then they're telling you what's missing. So they're very, very specific tools. Now, when we think about managed risk, how it differentiates, the truth is that managed risk is doing the same type functionality in that it's looking for very specific types of risks. But the differentiating part of that is what we've mentioned a couple of times, which is, a true managed risk tool is looking outside of agent-based tools. So we're not looking simply at Windows and Mac and Linux type boxes. We're looking for, network patching, network vulnerabilities, external web application vulnerabilities, dark web type things. So there's a lot of other pieces and parts that go along with managed risk. Now, the last part of that is an actual managed risk tool typically provides telemetry and asset information for those machines and endpoints that can run an agent back to another central tool, such as an MDR type tool, in order to play a good part and an additional information source in the overall MDR type deployment as well. So managed risk isn't antivirus and it's not a patching tool. It goes way beyond that. So definitely something you need to be looking at if you're limited to just an antivirus-based tool.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Looks like the next question, I have an EDR solution. Why would I need managed risk? Tim?
There it is.
Again, great question. Easy to answer. And really the reason I say it's easy to answer is because literally the answer is written within the name. EDR stands for endpoint detection and response. And managed risk is, managed risk. We talked about this a bit last week, and we also just talked about it when we're thinking about things like antivirus and patch management. EDR tools are 100% focused on detecting certain things and then telling you that they're there, and allowing you to perform specific remediation tasks. EDR tools are great. Again, we are not in the business of disparaging tools, but an EDR tool is effectively an antivirus tool on steroids. It will certainly detect things that it knows, but it doesn't get outside of its box. It's not looking for things that we in the industry call indicators of compromise, right? It's not putting multiple pieces of information on that endpoint together and coming up with the fact that there's a new risk, right? It's looking for a very specific type of risk and giving you the knowledge that it's there and providing you with the remediation steps, whether that's software-based or through an MSSP like our friends there with NetGain to provide those remediation efforts.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Scott, I didn't flip the other question to you. Do you have anything you wanted to add to those two?
No, I just thought it was funny that it said it doesn't step outside of its box. That's exactly where it sits, inside its box. It's an endpoint detection tool only.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, perfect. And then last question, I believe, unless we get one in while we're responding to this one. Most of my users are remote. How can managed risk help if my assets aren't within four walls?
Wow. That's a good question, and that's a question of the times, right? Some of the biggest challenges that IT has right now is their remote office and the remote workers, their work at home force. Being able to keep eyes on those devices, being able to make sure that they stay mature in their security posture is really important, and a strong managed risk tool can do that. It's not limited to that asset being within its perimeter for it to be managed. It is managed no matter where it goes, and that's the effectiveness of the program. A good managed risk solution like the Arctic Wolf program can keep tabs on the device no matter where it is. It cannot leave the sight of its understanding. The ability to be able to do that from an IT perspective is super important in maintaining this proper security posture of my workforce, and a good MR tool will do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Tim, any last comments?
No, the last thing I would really say, it definitely isn't any addition to the technical side of the coin. It's really about the thought process. Is that, you know, when we start looking at security tools, the first thing that we need to narrow down as we're evaluating those is this tool going to help me and not provide or require additional work? And the thing that really gets complicated is when I have multiple security tools like an EDR solution, like a separate risk solution, that are giving me information, but they're requiring me to do the correlation, the investigation and the remediation investigations. And that can really put you in a bind, because now you spent all this extra money for another tool and you've increased your workload. So, you know, being aware of the fact that tools in the security bailiwick aren't really the kind of things that typically do everything on their own. They need management. They need attention. It's certainly a part of your security posture journey and a knowledge process.
Yeah, and Megan, I want to add, I would be curious if you had that first poll up again, how much that 83%, based on the information we've now provided, would change that score.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know and to find out. So, okay, thank you all for sticking with us through this. I know we're a little bit over on our time, but if you do have any other questions on the topic, please do not hesitate to reach out to NetGain using the contact information on the screen. Thank you, Tim and Scott, for your insights today, and thank you everyone for attending today's coffee break. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our fourth and final coffee break. If you were able to join us over the past few weeks, you probably remember our speakers, but for those of you who were not able to join, and this might be your first one, I am Megan Reed, VP of Marketing at NetGain Technologies. And joining me today is again Scott Logan, Director of Security at NetGain, and Tim Smoot, Senior Systems Engineer at Arctic Wolf Networks. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us again today.
Thank you, Megan. Glad to be here.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Yes. So today we're going to take a deeper dive into managed cloud monitoring. And like we have before, we want to start and kick it off with our first polling question. So we want to know today, where does your organization stand in regard to cloud and security? Are you currently evaluating cloud options? Are you currently in the transition phase of moving to the cloud? Have you already completed your cloud implementation, if that's the route your organization is going? And are you interested in looking at cloud-specific security options? And Tim, while we give everybody time to respond, can you jump in quickly to just what is managed cloud monitoring?
Sure. I think probably the first thing I would say would be there's a lot of misconception about what the cloud actually brings to the table with respect to security requirements and or risks. I think one of the biggest things that I like to bring back to the forefront of folks' minds is the fact that the truth is that there is no cloud. It's just somebody else's computer, right? So when we look at it in that context, really what we kind of have to do is embrace the thought process that our our security posture extends to all portions of our business, whether that be
the stuff that's still on-prem, the folks that are working remotely now with the COVID scenario, as well as those cloud implementations that we've put into place. So we have to change the way we implement that security and a few of the things that we have to look at, but we shouldn't be looking at them any differently than we did when they were all in-house and standalone.
Yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Scott, before I close the poll?
No, I think Tim's spot on. I mean, whether you're picking up your infrastructure and transition up to the cloud, you're deploying an IaaS solution, or whether you're just using a particular service in the cloud, like Office 365 or something like that, SaaS solution, there's still a necessity of security at that level. So all you're doing is moving it, like Tim said, you're taking it to another computer. The security needs to follow.
Right. Okay, perfect. Well, let's close this poll and I'll share the results with everybody. So it looks like about 63% are evaluating cloud options and 13% on each of the others. Everybody's kind of fallen a little bit within each. So
that's pretty interesting, actually. And the truth is that all points of those cloud journeys are great times to evaluate the security aspects of the cloud. And in truth, when we're looking at the cloud and some of the things that it brings to the table, the flexibility, the ease of use, the rapid implementation, all of those things are great features for us to be able to leverage as a business. However, at the same time, when we look at those three things, flexibility, features, and rapid implementation, we actually introduce some very interesting security issues. And what that means is kind of like the old saying about the difference between Macs and Windows, right? Everybody looks at Macintosh or Apple as the most secure platform with respect to the operating system, and they consequently look at Windows as the least secure. And the truth is first of all, they're probably mostly correct, but secondarily, one of the reasons why Windows is inherently insecure isn't because it's a bad operating system, it's because it's much more open. So when we think about that openness, which includes that versatility and that ease of use and that rapid deployment capability, then we have to take that security side of that implementation as our own ownership. So when we look at things like Amazon for infrastructure as a service, there's default settings that make it easy to get that implemented and rapidly brought to bear for use for the business. But there's also some very critical configuration settings as you get started, as well as you go on with your implementation. And looking at that security as a dynamic piece of your overall implementation is critical. So having the eyes that look at it on a regular basis, as well as those that are intelligent about what those kind of security challenges with respect to those infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and security as a service solutions bring, is very much something that it gets kind of brushed aside because of the fact that those easy things or those very appealing aspects of the cloud journey kind of overrun them and very quickly get pushed out of our minds.
Yeah, I totally agree, Tim. I'm really kind of excited in that polling question that a majority of the responses had to do with evaluating the cloud, because I think that's so important. You don't just throw something up into something and expect it to be secure. It doesn't work that way. And if you're not putting eyes to that infrastructure, if you're not understanding what is happening in the cloud, then you're blind to an enormous area of threat and enormous area of sensitivity to your information. It is extremely important in your evaluation process to understand exactly how will I know what's happening with my data if it's stored at your location, if it's stored up in the cloud. How do I know what's infecting my systems or has access to my systems. That type of understanding is a necessity as you make this transition.
No doubt about it. And when we think about managed cloud monitoring, I think the assumption would be that it's a separate component or something different with respect to your security posture. And the truth is that managed cloud monitoring is an integral part of an MDR, a managed detection and response deployment, and to a certain extent, a managed risk deployment as well. So the reality of our previous coffee breaks and taking all of the information that we brought to bear within those coffee breaks and applying that to the overall cloud posture and journey is certainly the most applicable way to look at that cloud implementation or that ongoing cloud utilization aspect. Now, the other thing that I would add to that is the fact that anytime you implement a cloud component, you're kind of spreading out your visibility as well as your resources. And when you do that, sometimes you miss things that you wouldn't miss typically. And when we think about those cloud implementations, they, as we spoke before, they add a little bit more complexity to that visibility because some folks have the impression or the understanding that those cloud providers implement security for you. And the truth is they secure their own stuff. They definitely secure, their side of the infrastructure picture or their side of the software, and they do so very, very well. But they don't secure your implementation or the portion of it that you purchased. That's still your responsibility. So that's a little bit complicated when you think about it.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, the whole point of once you make that transition to the cloud, the amount of expertise of knowing what is happening in the cloud becomes very required. And a lot of the IT personnel or the people that manage perimeter type of systems, anything within your on-premise infrastructure, that's probably well defined and well secured. But as you now transition to the cloud, that requires a different level of expertise. That requires security professionals that know exactly how things work within the cloud so that they can bring that understanding to your IT team so they can be responsive. That level of security is just not present in a lot of organizations and requires certain security professionals to deliver that for them.
You couldn't have said it better. At the end of the day, the truth is Arctic Wolf onboards about 220 to 250 new customers per quarter. And as you can see by that stat there at the bottom of the screen, the numbers don't lie. In almost 50% of our customer base, there are threats or ongoing issues from a vulnerability perspective that include a cloud component. And those are numbers that bear across the entire industry. It's not just Arctic Wolf customer base. But at the end of the day, we look at things a little bit differently from a security perspective than we did back in the 90s and the 2000s and even yesterday for that matter, because security is an ongoing and evolving requirement. But at the same time, business requirements are ongoing and evolving as well. So as we evaluate new infrastructure, pieces and parts, things like storage and networking and firewalls and all the rest of that stuff, and think about the new features and the new flexibilities and the new extensions that those provide for a business, we have to also assume that security itself is also an evolving aspect of that. And the cloud is a very, very good representation of that ongoing security evolution because of the fact that it's changed the dynamic a bit, but it really hasn't changed the overall surface from a visibility side. Where that surface exists is certainly changing, but the fact that you have to evaluate and maintain and monitor those surfaces has not changed.
Right, and I think you said it right. There certainly can't be assumptions made in this transition. If you move your infrastructure up to Amazon Web Services, just to put it in one of their S3 buckets doesn't make it secure. You have to evaluate the security of that bucket. You have to make sure that it is properly positioned to protect your information as it resides in their services. And that's something that it's just not done automatically. You have to make sure that those are done. There are certain things, like you said, that are not enabled by default. You have to turn on certain logins to be aware of what's happening. And if there's something that is doing something malicious in the cloud, some sort of unauthorized cloud access or something like that, you need to have eyes on that. That's kind of like a shadow IT awareness program that will bring that information to you that something malicious is happening in it. You've heard of probably form jacking and the effort of somebody getting in and stealing form data out of cloud or out of web applications. That type of awareness needs to be brought to you. If you're going to make this jump into the cloud, and I think it's a right move, just make sure that the securities are positioned there to provide you the information that you need to understand for it to operate normally and effectively for you.
Yeah, and finally, the thing that I would bring to the table that really hits home, I think, for most customers and most folks evaluating any kind of aspect with respect to implementation in the IT world is that, there's standards and controls that we implement across all of our different implementations. We do so even in our accounting departments and finance and manufacturing floors and things of that nature. So when we start building these standards and controls, they need to be monitored, they need to be enforced, and they need to be maintained. And when we do that and we think about that in an overall architectural deployment with respect to IT, whether that's on-prem, remote for our remote users, as well as our cloud implementations, some of the most critical parts of having a good ongoing security posture is maintaining those standards and understanding that they're implemented correctly every single time and without fail. Because as we react, just like we do in our internal ID departments, when somebody says, hey, I need this new application installed, most of the time we don't get the luxury of evaluating whether that's the right application or whether there's other options that will be more secure or more performant or whatever it is. We're just basically, as an IT organization, told to get it done. I'm sure everyone would agree with that. So when we think about that in the context of security, though, we need to bring that security thought process to the front of our minds instead of it being what we do after we've done those deployments. So I think the ongoing trend and the talk track through this entire coffee break series has been really beneficial because we kind of link everything together with respect to that talk track of security is something that goes across the entire infrastructure, whether it's from a proactive or a reactive approach with the managed detection and response or managed risk, but more importantly, the active component, which is keeping the eyes on glass, keeping those professionals looking at the things that need to be looked at, staying educated on what's available and what you need to look for and what you need to be aware of, and then finally, making all of that put together in a way that doesn't drain the resources and the talent pool that you already have in your IT department.
I love the idea of keeping the eyes on the glass, and I want it to be a single pane of glass. I want to go one place to get my understanding about my on-prem, about my risk, and about my cloud solutions, and that's important.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Scott. Now we'd like to flip it over and open it up for questions. So if you haven't done so already, but you have some questions, whether or not it's on managed cloud monitoring or any of the 4 topics that we talked about in these coffee breaks, please submit those questions in the bottom right hand of your screen. And while you're doing that, as we have on each one, we want to give you the opportunity to continue the conversation with us. So I'm going to throw up another polling question, and if you have interest in continuing the conversation, please fill that out on your screen. While we jump over, let's see, the first question: if I move part or all of my infrastructure software to the cloud, isn't it the cloud provider's responsibility to provide security? Tim, you want to take that one?
Yeah, we actually talked a little bit about that before, but at the end of the day, they certainly are securing their side of it. They're making sure that they're following standards and they're doing the very best from both an implementation as well as an ongoing monitoring side of the coin. But because of the versatility and the overall speed that most of their customer base requires, a lot of the integrated security with those tools is still the responsibility of the end user or the customer to both implement, maintain, and monitor. So it is still the customer's responsibility.
So here we go down that assumption path again, right? Don't make assumptions that security is present. Don't make assumptions that backup of your data is present. Make sure that you know that exactly what is being included with their offerings and their deliverables as you move or transition to the cloud, and make sure that it's at the security level that is necessary for your compliance levels.
Yep, that's right. All right, second question. How can a hacker actually harm a business when everything is outside of the normal four walls? Tim, you want that one too?
Sure. That's an interesting one. As we said earlier, about 50% of the customer base with Arctic Wolf has some kind of cloud component. I think that the easy part of that to understand is the visibility side of the coin. Hackers are certainly looking for the easiest way to gain access to, whether it's information or just accounts and things of that nature. So they know that if you're implementing something new on Office 365 or Amazon or Azure or something like that, when they see new customers get deployed up there, and trust me, they are monitoring for that, they assume that there's going to be things that those customers haven't implemented yet, and they target them. And if they see some kind of a vulnerability in the cloud implementation of that particular business or organization, the next target's going to be the on-prem stuff. So it is very, very relevant to understand that security needs to be the forefront of those cloud type implementations, because it can kind of be a little red flag that the hackers are now coming for the rest of your business.
Yeah, and I love it that you said target, because when you have an on-prem Exchange solution, you have a very small target for the attackers. They have to be basically attacking you directly. When you pick that up and you move it up into the cloud, you put it maybe in Office 365 platform, now you're in a very large target. And there are script kiddies out there that are actually looking for new domains that join that pool and go right after the users within that and trying to trick them into doing something malicious, like providing their credentials to a fake Office 365 login page. So you have to be very strategic and secure about that.
Yeah, I think when we were talking yesterday, we talked about specialized hackers and how there are different hackers for different things, and made me think of specialized doctors, or you have different doctors for different things. Okay, last question it looks like, unless another one comes in between now and then. What is the benefit of monitoring the cloud? Does it benefit the on-premise security as well? Scott, you want that one?
I will take that one. That is interesting question, because there is a separation of duty there with what happens on-prem and what happens up in the cloud. So you need to have eyes on the glass, as Tim stated, for both of them. But what I have normally seen in most of the assistance that I've had with companies securing the cloud is that we identify certain security parameters that were not secure in the on-prem solution. We made it tight up in the cloud, but when we started looking at some of the controls that we were implementing, we realized that those securities were not defined and not as protected in the cloud. So I think there's a nice transition process of learning on both sides, and as you secure one side, the other side becomes secure as well.
Agree 100%.
Wonderful. Well, if you all have any other questions on any of the coffee break topics, manage detection and response, manage risk, manage cloud monitoring, or just your overall IT security operational approach, please do not hesitate to reach out to NetGain using the contact information on your screen. Tim, Scott, thank you so much. Is there anything that you would like to add as we kind of wrap this entire series here? Tim, I'll start with you.
I just want to say thanks. I think this is a great idea. Hopefully it was valuable to the folks that joined. We're looking forward to speaking with each and every one of you and answering any additional questions, anything specific about your implementation. We're happy to answer questions, so feel free to reach out, and hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Scott, anything that you would like to add?
Megan, you know, I'm the Director of Security for NetGain. I love security. I love talking about security. I'm so excited that we've had the attendance that we've had over these coffee breaks. The information, I hope, was beneficial for everyone that enjoyed those deliverables. And thank you once again for attending, and just love being here. Thank you.
Perfect. And thank you all for your expertise. And thank you everybody for attending our coffee break sessions on IT security. Please enjoy the rest of your day.